We've done this many a time. I talked about this yesterday on the show. But this is a very clear and simple moment, frankly, when it comes to forces about good. Like a lot of times the world is very, very complicated. There's nuance, etc. This is clear as day. The United States government is trying to punish, torture, and humiliate a whistleblower and a journalist for exposing American war crimes. Crimes of the highest extent in America's imperial adventures in the Middle East, right? Assange is being tried and targeted for bringing the crimes of the American government to light. The United States is trying to extradite him on extremely dubious charges. Remember, Assange is not an American citizen. When this happened, he was not in the United States of America. And the United States government is trying to charge him under the Espionage Act, right? So, which is something that even like the most like kind of right-wing freaks recognize as a law that is one of the more anti-democratic statutes that they have on the books that they can throw at somebody, right? So it would be bad enough if it was an American citizen, it was happening in the United States, whatever charges they're bringing against him, whatever activities they're accusing him of. It would be bad enough if this was an American citizen, but this is a foreign citizen. Somebody who was not engaged in these activities inside of the United States borders. So what this is like a kind of general threat, not just to American democracy, but to the globe, right? That if you do something that embarrasses the United States of America, we will use the powers that we have, right? Through our massive military, but also through our massive financial and political power to bring you to the United States of America to face charges in this country. I mean, it is an extreme affront, not just to American democracy, but to just like global sovereignty, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like a lot of these countries have, I think the UK is one, but like that, these deals where we don't extradite to countries that, for instance, torture, and there is absolutely reasonable a suspicion to believe that Assange is going to face all sorts of awful conditions that other countries would not accept, and on top of the ones that he's had to deal with for years already. But yeah, the message sent to anybody, you expose us, we'll bring you here and F you, basically.
And note that like the United Kingdom, they originally said they will not extradite Assange to the United States because they felt that bringing him to the United States and facing the American justice system would be a threat to their human rights, right? Which is as big of an indictment on the American system as you can get. So again, this is one of those things that it's very, very, very clear. And I think that people need to be a lot more vocal and upfront in their support of Assange. I know this has been a long, drawn-out process at this point, so it might not always be at the top of everybody's minds. But this is, this attempt is coming to a head. Assange just recently faced a stroke. And people should also remember all the context of things that have been going along with this. Assange has had American, CIA officials essentially threaten his children recently, say that they have been tracking him, his children, and his partner, right? This is not some kind of this is not just limited to like the courts, right? This is like an entire security state that is using their resources to threaten, again, a publisher who exposed the fact that the United States was engaged in torture, the fact that the United States was engaged in mass wanton killing of people, right? Things that you should want to be brought to the light of day if you are a citizen of a democracy, right? Whose brain has just not completely melted. This is a very, very simple call. And it's something that fascinates me that there are so many people. I think I have to say, track record on this, socialists are pretty good at it because they recognize the stakes. The progressives, very, very hit or miss. And I think this is a very clear call that people can make, that this is not, frankly, like I hate when people say this, make this kind of argument, but like this really is not left or right, frankly. This is not this party or that party. This is not this faction versus that faction. This is, do you think, as a citizen of a very powerful country, that the actions of this government should be brought to light so that we can decide if we want that done in our name or not? That if the government is lying to us, that people will come forward and make sure that we know the truth, right? Do you want to live in a society where that is what happens? Or do you want to live in a society where people who expose atrocities by this government, have their names dragged through the mud, are tortured in front of all of us, all while people say that they deserve it? We'll get to the 2016 stuff in a second, but yeah, I just I think this is a very simple call, and I wanted to shout out some people and call out some people, unless you had something else to add.
Yeah, no, I think on top of the progressive folks, I think like Greenwald and Co. are right to call out the Guardian and folks that made so much fucking hay from disclosures to not, and to that they were saying shit during the Trump administration, because at that point the history was Obama had sort of backed off, I guess, and then Trump had ramped it back up, so it became a partisan issue again. And then now Biden is, I mean, that's the way to make it, if you want to have a family member, you could try to maybe get in with that way. Like Obama did this, and why is Biden doing the Trump thing? But I frankly don't think that's at that point, but yeah, I agree with your overall sentiment.
And it has to be said. I mean, Obama really did ramp up, abuse and targeting of whistleblowers, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that you should take very seriously. Now, I'll just say this because it's the internet, and I know everyone gets into the internet squabbles, and there are people for sure who have tried to make this into a very weird cottage industry, that they're the people who want to present themselves as people who care the most, or they're the only people who care about the Assange stuff. And I can understand as somebody who I've been talking about this ever since we've had a public platform, right? And have been advocating for us to cover this as much as we can, in addition to all the other things that we cover, right? So it can be a little personally annoying for me when some people are like, are you saying anything about Assange? I'm the real, true, free Assange guy, and you're not. Frankly, the solution there is simple. It's just to be loud and bold enough and upfront enough about your support for Assange and against this kind of, attacks on whistleblowers, so they have no leg to stand on. That's it.
And then you don't have to care.
Because what happens, I see sometimes on the progressive left, especially people in the media, is they get annoyed at some a segment of online characters, right, who try to act like they're the only ones who recognize that this is a problem.
Yeah.
And they actually let it get to them to such a point that they fail in a moment like this to say free Assange, right? Which is, that's ludicrous. You need to have a bigger spine than that if you want to be talking politics on the TV, right? Beyond that, I wanted to note two things. First, shout out. This is a shout out. We haven't done shout outs in a little while, but want to shout out. Somebody shout out a lot on the show. Ilhan Omar. Maybe not as early and as adamant as I would like it, but here she is. She's tweeted, earlier today on the show, Mehdi Hassan. Again, it's not a perfect character either, but is bringing this to the MSNBC audience, and we're not going to play the clip, but in it, Mehdi Hassan says, you might not like this, to the audience, and we're going to get to MSNBC more in depth in a second. But anyways, Ilhan right here comes out very clearly and says, on the show, Mehdi Hassan makes the case for why the prosecution of Assange is indefensible. Give it a listen. I think that's great that Ilhan is standing clearly with Assange there. I think that the rest of the squad should join her. I think Bernie Sanders should join her. Bernie Sanders has said things in the past. It's not like people are silent on this, but this is a clear moment right now, and it's the Biden administration. You were talking about it when it was Trump. Let's talk about when it's Biden, when you have a little bit more of his ear. The silence has been very, very worrying, I must say. But let's get to one last thing, because I think that this is important, and it's something that ever since I got into this kind of role, I think for the most part, our audience feels one way about this now. But this Russia stuff has been such poison. It has been such poison to journalism and democracy. I'm talking about this kind of liberal delusion about this kind of mass grand conspiracy that Trump was not created by right-wing domestic reaction, but actually some kind of, international plot, to put him into power, right? Again, Assange is not being investigated and charged for this because of the leaking of Hillary Clinton's emails back in the 2016 election, right? So anybody who starts, whenever you start talking about Assange, if somebody starts talking about that, you tell them right now that is not what he's being brought up for, right? And if they continue to go on, they don't know what they're talking about, and they're like willfully being ignorant, right? That being said, even if he was being charged for exposing what was exposed in those emails, which was that Hillary Clinton and the DNC and all of these other characters were actively rigging a democratic election, that still would be wrong for him to be charged and to be attacked for it. But I just want to go here with everything that we know now about Russiagate and all this kind of stuff, that there was no meat on the bones, that this was a huge excuse for very powerful people to start targeting smaller outlets. I mean, look, I was one of those people who was put on those dumbass lists of Russian agents out there, right? A kid, working nights and weekends at a bar to get by and blogging for like small left-wing publications, somehow like involved in this grand Russian, like this has real consequences. And, obviously it's personal for me on that level, but for people like Assange, like these consequences are at their height. And there's not been a reckoning with this. And this is MSNBC just this week refusing to sort of recognize like the role that they play. Julian Assange extradition could mean even more legal trouble for Donald Trump, right? And
wow.
I know. And it's an opinion piece, of course, but this matters. You can go, and is it because MSNBC opinion columns?
Frank Fagluzzi.
You go through this entire piece, and they're talking about Assange, and all the things that they don't like about him. And it takes a while. Here we go. For them, so it takes a while for them to even set up again because, the reason I bring this up is because if you are just an MSNBC viewer, right, and this is all that you sort of get, this is how you get your information, you think Assange is being brought up in front of charges in the United States for tilting the election in Donald Trump's favor by, exposing these, these emails, right? And this is why I think it's malpractice as a journalist, again, to start off a piece with this much text before you get into, look, this is all the text that we get into until they finally admit, though, oh, yeah, by the way, Assange is not being charged for exposing Hillary Clinton's emails. The charges against Assange concern whether an organization that exists primarily to solicit and disseminate illegally obtained government secrets can be considered a media organization entitled to the First Amendment protections. I'll answer that question right now. Yes, they can. How is it not, media operation to try to distribute and disseminate information about activities of the United States government at war, right?
Yeah, you're only media if you have enough lawyers.
You're only media if you spend enough time in J school learning how to fucking lie, and basically regurgitate press releases. Again, so they finally say they are not based on WikiLeaks publishing Democratic Party emails hacked by the Russian government in support of Trump. Again, exposing Hillary Clinton somehow means you're in support of Trump, which again, I find to be completely ludicrous, right? Because there was no punishment or a real reckoning for what happened with that was exposed in those emails, because a whole segment of the American population basically saw blue versus red, right? If the Department of Justice plays its cards right, it can make the case precisely about those Russian government hacks and WikiLeaks' dissemination of the content of those hacks by offering a deal to Assange in return for what he knows. How amazing is that, Bubba, right? They're talking right here about how the case has nothing to do with their insane fantasy that they've been pumping for the past 5 years, but maybe, just maybe, the United States government can threaten Assange with torture, can threaten Assange with potentially never seeing their family again, so that they can get Assange to go out in front of Congress, right, and say, oh, the 2016 election, we were the factor behind it, right? That should worry Trump and his allies. Mueller wasn't looking for collusion between the 2016 campaign and Russia, but on provable evidence of a criminal conspiracy with Russia to affect the election. While Mueller did find that Trump and others met with Russians at the Trump Tower because they believed blah, 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 he concluded that, yeah.
If this was in Pravda during like the show trials, they would say this was like trying to coach people on what they should do to get a good outcome, right? Like that's right. So like Assange, play ball here. Just give us some shit on Trump, maybe, and then maybe I don't know. Maybe Uncle Joe will give you a pardon or something after some time served.
Exactly. No, Assange may be able to close the gap between collusion and criminal conspiracy. Again, there is no evidence at this point. Look, Trump sucks, and I have no doubt about it that Trump like does not care enough about American democracy as a concept to like not take information from foreign governments to sort of aid his campaign, right? I'll even give you that. But the fact is that this kind of Russiagate story, right, has always been about one thing: explaining the fact that the Democratic Party, why the Democratic Party lost a layup election against a candidate, again, that was, was encouraged to be elected by the Clinton campaign, right? They were running interference to try to get Trump to become the GOP nominee because they thought he would be a slam dunk. And they lost against him because they're completely out of touch with the American voters, right? And then you create this insane ideology that, it's not our leaders that are out of touch, it's not our Democratic Party systems that are out of touch. The game was rigged. So again, and it's been proven time and time again at this point, that there is no meat on the bones of that. Right? I mean, we've devoted years at this point. You know what I mean? If there was something, it would really have exposed itself right now. The only people who are still holding on to it is this kind of MSNBC liberal, class that has made such a career out of selling this lie. They have to continue acting like we're just a week away. Is as delusional as the people who are like, Donald Trump is going to become elected, it's going to be sworn into the Oval Office on like December 30th. We got the date wrong last time, the time before. Anyways, let me just read this last paragraph and we can zoom out. Assange may be able to close the gap between collusion and criminal conspiracy. Assange got the Democratic National Committee data dump from an entity long suspected to be a front for the GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Service. In fact, WikiLeaks actively sought them out. Why? The Mueller team indicted 12 GRU officers for that hack. But what did the candidate Trump know about WikiLeaks, Russia connection, and when did he know it? Right? Again, the hope here is that they can sort of paint a narrative and tell a story that, again, we're just this close to the final revelation about Trump 2016, which is, it truly boggles the mind that there's still appetite for this kind of stuff. But beyond it just being something like, this story is wrong, right? This story is wrong. This delusion is bad for our politics. It's dangerous for this country because it's now made in a whole bunch of people's minds, people who did not support the Iraq War, people who did not support President Bush, right? In their mind, it has turned somebody like Assange and movements like WikiLeaks that were trying to expose war crimes done by the American government, but also done by the Bush government, to try to make it seem like the guy who is exposing the atrocities done by the American government is the bad guy, because he didn't help out because he hurt the electoral chances of your favorite person in 2016, Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's extremely, extremely delusional, but it's also extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, look, I have beef with WikiLeaks going back to the ClimateGate stuff, but even to put like publishing those ClimateGate emails in like 2012 or whatever, important context for that is that stuff really took off when the New York Times covered it, and that was before WikiLeaks republished it, right? But like I say that to say this: even if you're so poisoned from this organization, from that stuff, which is frankly a difference in editorial decision like making, and I don't, and like I think you got to understand the systemic free speech stakes here, and it I think that's really all. Like, that's what makes this open and shut. Like it doesn't really matter. Nothing else really matters.
I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I'll just say this. Like at WikiLeaks, like obviously you're making decisions about what kind of things you're trying to find and what kind of things you're putting out there, right? I don't think that WikiLeaks has been actively sort of suppressing like bombshell information that they get. But I'll tell you this right now. like Assange doesn't share I don't share politics with Assange. I've listened to many like interviews with him. I mean, a really fascinating and funny one to watch is him, Slavoj Žižek, and David Horowitz of all people, right? It shows that, like, yeah, I have certainly have very serious political differences with Assange, and the vast majority of people who are sort of tuned into that WikiLeaks project, from Snowden to even Manning at times, right? That doesn't mean I think they're bad people. It just means, like, we just don't share the same. I don't find them as members of my political, like, party, my socialist movement. But for fuck's sake, I absolutely respect and understand them as people trying to get some truth and information out there, right? Yeah. And you could be mad about what kind of information, maybe they're like, whose information they're exposing, but at the end of the day, it's information nonetheless. I mean, unless we're really talking about things that like don't have any veracity, I think sometimes getting super precious about like, oh, well, why did they not expose the RNC's emails versus the DNC's emails, instead of saying like, okay, well, we've got some information here that is very helpful from some of the most powerful people in the world, right? This is not just like a small group of people who just happen to have like their personal emails exposed. This is a political party in 2016 in regards to the Democratic Party, that had every reason to think that they were about to be in a position of having, Senate, presidency, and the House of Representatives under their control, had somebody who they effectively privately anointed into that position and then actively worked to suppress like the legitimating factor to them, which is like the election, the democracy aspect, and that got exposed. Look, Trump's a threat. That fascist far right thing is a threat. But if you don't think that that's a serious thing either in this system, you've got rocks in your heads, man.
Well, and then whose arms did Democrats run into? The FBI, who, by the way, like James Comey said, we're going to investigate her. If anything had the FBI had a bigger effect on Hillary losing than fucking Julian Assange did. And yet we have to know who fucking Robert Mueller is, besides some guy who entrapped a bunch of Muslim teenagers into fucking terror charges. Same with James Comey. That's what the FBI has been fucking really doing. It looks like all these fucking spies and all this crazy stuff. Turns out we should have been in fucking Dearborn, filming care meetings. I
think that's 100% right. Well, anyways, I mean, I know I went off there, but it builds up sometimes because to me, it's so shocking because I really do think this is a simple ass call. Free Assange. Happy to see Ilhan stand with him in that movement. I would hope to see more backbone from other members of the progressive movement.
I mean, even just generally, honestly, after the amount of, I mean, we got to get to the post game. We'll talk about all this stuff more there. But between Nancy Pelosi saying, "I will trade stocks, motherfuckers," get out of my face about it.
What a news day, yeah.
The Build Back Better going. I mean, what am I forgetting?
I mean, people were floating
Hillary Clinton again to make it. Hillary Clinton's going back.
Student loans.
We want a smooth transition back to student loan repayments. I think we would circle back to those conversations about the squad needs, if the squad is going to be sharing small donor cash with those motherfuckers, then we are going to be starting saying do not donate to the squad. It's going to have to be independent socialists and stuff like that, because that is what are we getting? What's been got? We had a few weeks where we could pretend we're still going to get the Build Back Better. Now it's going to be, we're going to go really hard at voting rights. Joe Manchin doesn't give a fuck about voting rights.
No, I mean,